The sun was just beginning to rise over the private airport, casting a warm glow over the runway where sleek jets sat in a silent row. Among them, a gleaming, custom-designed jet stood out, its polished surface reflecting the morning light like a mirror. It wasn't just any jet, it was hers. Ava Sinclair had worked her way up from nothing, building her empire through grit, determination, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. For her, the jet symbolized more than success. It was a tangible reminder of the sacrifices, sleepless nights, and barriers she had broken through as a black woman in an industry dominated by anything but people who looked like her. Ava had planned this day carefully. She was scheduled to fly to a major business conference where she would deliver a keynote speech, her most significant appearance yet. It was a chance to inspire others and continue her mission of proving that women like her belonged in every room and every conversation. With her sleek black suit and perfectly styled curls, she exuded confidence as she approached the terminal with her assistant, Malik, by her side. But from the moment they stepped into the private terminal, something felt off. The atmosphere was strangely tense. A uniformed flight attendant, who Ava had never seen before, glanced at her, then quickly looked away as if avoiding eye contact. The rest of the crew appeared to be huddled near the jet, whispering among themselves. Ava noticed one of them gesture in her direction before abruptly turning their backs. She brushed it off at first. Maybe it was nothing, she thought. After all, today was too important to let small distractions ruin her focus. But as she reached the jet, a tall, middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform stepped forward, blocking her path. His expression was unreadable, but there was an air of authority in the way he stood. "Excuse me, ma'am," he began, his tone polite but firm. "We need to have a quick word before you board." Ava raised an eyebrow, glancing at Malik, who seemed just as puzzled as she was. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying the weight of someone who was used to demanding answers. The man hesitated, then glanced at the rest of the crew, who were now awkwardly avoiding her gaze. "I'm afraid I can't allow you to board this aircraft." For a moment, the words didn't register. Ava stared at him, waiting for some kind of explanation that might make sense. "I'm sorry, what?" she said, her tone sharper now. "I have orders," the pilot continued, his voice quieter now. "We can't take off with you on board." The air seemed to leave the room. Ava could feel Malik shift uncomfortably beside her, but her focus was locked on the pilot's face, searching for any sign that this was some kind of misunderstanding. "Orders? From who?" she demanded. "Because as far as I'm concerned, I own this plane. You don't get to tell me where I can or can't go." The pilot opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, one of the flight attendants stepped forward, a nervous edge in her voice. It's not personal, ma'am. We were just told." "Not personal?" Ava interrupted, her voice rising. She took a step closer, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "You're telling me I can't board my own jet asterisk, and you think I'm going to accept that without an explanation?" The crew exchanged uneasy glances, and for the first time, Ava felt a flicker of something deeper beneath her frustration, something that felt a lot like humiliation. She could feel the eyes of other passengers in the terminal, some of whom were now pretending not to watch the scene unfolding. Malik finally spoke up, his voice steady but tinged with anger. "This is unacceptable. You all realize who you're talking to, right? Do you have any idea how many people would kill for the chance to even be on this jet?" The pilot shifted uncomfortably but didn't move from his position. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "I'm just doing my job. If you have an issue, you'll need to take it up with the company." Ava let out a sharp laugh, more out of disbelief than anything else. "The company? I am the company," she shot back. "And as of this moment, you're all fired." Her words hung in the air, cutting through the tension like a blade. For a moment, no one moved. The pilot's face went pale, and the flight attendants froze, their expressions a mix of shock and fear. But Ava wasn't done. She took another step forward, her eyes blazing with the kind of determination that had carried her through every challenge she'd faced in her life. "I'll find another crew," she said, her voice steady and unyielding. "But let me make one thing clear. You don't get to disrespect me and walk away from it." As the stunned crew began to gather their belongings, Ava turned to Malik. "Get on the phone," she said. "Find out who's behind this. I want answers before we leave this airport." And with that, she walked back toward the terminal, her head held high despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. She had built her empire by refusing to back down, and she wasn't about to start now. What she didn't know, though, was that this incident was only the beginning. Somewhere behind the scenes, forces were at work, forces that would test her resolve in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was certain: Ava Sinclair was ready for a fight. Ava paced back and forth in the private terminal, her heels clicking against the tiled floor as Malik stood a few steps away, furiously typing on his phone. The adrenaline from the confrontation still coursed through her veins, but now it was mixed with something else, an unsettling sense of betrayal. She had spent years building a reputation as a fearless, respected leader, someone who couldn't be shaken. And yet, here she was, locked out of her own jet by the very people she had trusted to carry out her vision. "Anything yet?" Ava asked, glancing over at Malik. "Still waiting," he replied, his voice clipped. "I've reached out to the charter company and legal team. Someone has to know what's going on." Ava sighed, running a hand through her curls. She hated waiting, especially when it felt like her authority was being questioned. Everything about the situation felt wrong, from the cryptic attitude of the crew to the pilot's refusal to give her a straight answer. But what unsettled her most was the lingering thought that this wasn't just an isolated incident. Ava's journey to success hadn't been smooth. She had encountered resistance at every turn, from people who doubted her abilities to those who outright tried to sabotage her. She'd fought harder than most to prove her worth in an industry where being a black woman often meant working twice as hard to get half the recognition. So, when things like this happened, her instincts told her to dig deeper, because more often than not, there was something beneath the surface. As she waited, Ava's mind wandered to the past. She thought about the long nights she spent drafting business plans in her tiny apartment, fueled by little more than determination and instant coffee. She thought about the countless meetings where she'd walked into boardrooms filled with people who didn't look like her, who spoke to her as if she didn't belong. But every setback had only strengthened her resolve. She remembered the day she bought the jet, a milestone she had dreamed about for years. It wasn't just about luxury, it was about freedom. The freedom to go where she wanted, when she wanted, without answering to anyone. Owning that jet had been a statement, a declaration that she had made it on her own terms. And now, standing here in this terminal, she felt that freedom slipping through her fingers. "Got something," Malik said suddenly, breaking her train of thought. He looked up from his phone, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. "The company's saying they didn't issue any orders to ground you. In fact, they're as confused as we are." Ava frowned. "So, if it didn't come from them, then who?" "That's the question," Malik said. "But there's more. One of the reps mentioned something about a flagged file. They're looking into it now, but they wouldn't say much over the phone." "Flagged file?" Ava repeated, her voice sharp. "What does that even mean?" Malik shrugged. "Could be anything. Security protocol, a mistake, or someone's trying to mess with me," Ava finished. Her tone was calm, but the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. Malik hesitated. "It's possible. I mean, you've made some waves lately. The speech, the deals. You're on a lot of people's radar." Ava knew he was right. In the past few months alone, she had landed a series of high-profile partnerships, including a major deal that disrupted one of the most competitive industries in the market. It wasn't the first time she'd stepped on toes to get what she wanted, and it wouldn't be the last. But who would go to such lengths to humiliate her? Before she could dwell on it further, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. The message was short but chilling. Asterisk, careful who you trust. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She showed the message to Malik, who frowned as he read it. "Do you recognize the number?" he asked. "No," Ava said, her voice quieter now. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. "This isn't random. Someone knows something." Malik looked around the terminal, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for anyone who seemed out of place. "Do you think it's someone here? One of the crew?" "It could be anyone," Ava said. She slipped her phone back into her pocket and crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. "But whoever it is, they're trying to rattle me. And it's working." For the first time that morning, Ava allowed herself to feel the weight of the situation. It wasn't just about being denied access to her jet, it was about control. Someone out there wanted her to feel powerless, and they were succeeding. But Ava wasn't one to back down, not without a fight. "Get the company on the line again," she told Malik. "I want a full report on that flagged file. And call security while you're at it. If someone's playing games, I want to know who and why." Malik nodded and stepped away to make the calls, leaving Ava alone with her thoughts. She glanced back at the jet through the glass windows of the terminal. It still sat there, gleaming in the sunlight, as if mocking her. As she stared at it, a memory surfaced, something her grandmother used to say when Ava was a little girl. Asterisk. They can try to take away what you've built, but they can never take away who you are. Those words had carried her through some of her darkest moments, and now, they gave her the strength to stand a little taller. Whoever was behind this would regret underestimating her. Moments later, Malik returned, his expression grim. Security's on their way, but the company's still stonewalling. They said they'll need more time to figure out what's going on. Time is the one thing we don't have, Ava said. She glanced at her watch. The conference was hours away, but every delay chipped away at her plans. We're not waiting. Get me a list of every person on my payroll who had access to this flight. If someone's trying to sabotage me, I want to know if they're in my circle. As Malik worked to compile the list, Ava felt the tension in the room grow heavier. The other passengers in the terminal kept their distance, but she could feel their curious eyes on her. She ignored them, focusing instead on the task at hand. Whoever had sent that text knew more than they were letting on. And if they thought they could shake her confidence, they were wrong. Ava wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong, for every woman who had been underestimated, for every barrier she had broken along the way. But as determined as she was, one question lingered in the back of her mind, refusing to be ignored. If this was just the beginning, how far would her enemies go to bring her down? The answer, she realized, was something she wasn't sure she wanted to find out. The hum of activity in the terminal seemed to fade into the background as Ava sat down, her mind working overtime. She had never felt so blindsided. The jet, her team, the strange text, it was all connected somehow, but she couldn't piece it together yet. Malik handed her a tablet, his face tense. Here's the list, he said. Everyone who's worked a flight in the last 6 months, down to maintenance and catering. Ava scrolled through the names, her eyes scanning each one carefully. Most of them were familiar, people she had worked with for years, trusted to handle things without her needing to micromanage. But now, every name felt like a potential suspect. Was it someone looking for a payday? Someone who resented her success? Or worse, someone who had been planted there all along? Her gaze stopped on a name she didn't recognize, Lisa Greer. Who's this? Ava asked, holding up the tablet. Malik squinted at the name. New hire, he said. Flight attendant. She's only been with us a few weeks. I think she was on the crew today. Ava's eyes narrowed. And we didn't vet her thoroughly? How does someone slip through the cracks like that? I'll look into her, Malik said quickly, pulling out his phone again. As he made the call, Ava leaned back in her chair, trying to suppress the growing frustration inside her. She had built her company on trust, trust in her team, trust in her own judgment. But now, that foundation felt shakier than ever. Across the room, a man in a dark suit caught her eye. He was standing near the window, seemingly engrossed in his phone, but Ava noticed the way he glanced in her direction every so often. He wasn't trying to be obvious, but something about him felt off. Ava nudged Malik. You see that guy over there? She whispered. Malik followed her gaze and nodded. Yeah, he's been here a while. You think he's watching us? Maybe, Ava said, her voice low. Or maybe I'm just paranoid. Malik shrugged. Paranoia is not a bad thing right now. Want me to go talk to him? Ava shook her head. No, let's see if he makes a move. But keep an eye on him. The minutes dragged on, each one amplifying the tension in the air. Malik was still on the phone, digging into Lisa Greer's background, when Ava's phone buzzed again. She hesitated before picking it up, half expecting another cryptic message. But this time, it was an email, subject line. Urgent. Information you need to see. The sender was anonymous, and Ava's first instinct was to delete it. But something about the timing made her pause. Against her better judgment, she opened the email. Inside was a single attachment, a photo. It was grainy, like it had been taken from a security camera, but the image was clear enough to send a chill down her spine. It showed two people standing near what appeared to be the entrance to a private hangar. One of them was the pilot who had denied her boarding earlier. The other was a man she didn't recognize, but there was something familiar about his posture, the way he carried himself. Before she could process the image, another message popped up on her screen. This one was a text, from the same unknown number as before. Asterisk. Ask your pilot about his side job. Ava's pulse quickened. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching, they were pulling the strings. And now they wanted her to know it. She turned to Malik, her voice urgent. Forget the flight attendant for now. We need to find the pilot. He's involved in this somehow. Malik looked skeptical but nodded. I'll track him down. If he's still on the property, security can bring him in. As Malik walked off, Ava sat back, trying to steady her breathing. She felt like she was being pulled in 100 different directions, each one leading to more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. This wasn't random. Someone was targeting her, and they were doing it in a way that felt deeply personal. The man in the dark suit shifted again, drawing her attention. This time, he was on the phone, his body angled slightly away from her as if to shield his conversation. Ava's instincts screamed at her to confront him, but she held back. If he was part of this, she didn't want to tip him off that she had noticed him. Instead, she pulled out her phone and snapped a quick photo of him, making it look like she was checking her emails. If nothing else, she'd have something to show Malik or the authorities later. Minutes later, Malik returned, his expression grim. The pilot's gone, he said. Security checked the crew lounge, the parking lot, nothing. He must have slipped out right after we left the jet. Ava clenched her jaw. Of course he did. Because he knew we'd come looking. There's more, Malik added. I got some basic info on Lisa Greer. She worked for another private charter company before us, but she only lasted 3 months. Left under questionable circumstances. What kind of circumstances? Ava asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. Malik hesitated. The official reason was a conflict with management. But there were rumors about stolen information, client lists, flight schedules. Nothing was ever proven, but it's enough to raise a red flag. Ava exhaled sharply, her frustration boiling over. So we've got a shady flight attendant, a pilot who's conveniently disappeared, and someone sending me cryptic messages like this is a game. What's next, Malik? Are they going to try and take my company while they're at it? Not if we figure out who's behind this first, Malik said. But we need more to go on. Ava nodded, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. Start digging into Lisa's past. See if there's any connection between her and the pilot. And check the company records. Whoever sent that email had access to security footage. That's not something just anyone can get their hands on. As Malik got back to work, Ava's eyes drifted back to the man in the suit. He was still there, still pretending not to notice her. But now, she was certain he was involved. Standing up, she straightened her jacket and walked toward him, her heels clicking with purpose. If he wanted to play games, fine. But Ava Sinclair didn't play to lose. The man glanced up as she approached, his expression neutral but his posture tense. Can I help you? He asked, his tone polite but guarded. Ava smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I don't know. Can you? The man's eyes darted to the side, just for a moment, but Ava caught it. A subtle tell, a flicker of unease. She didn't back down, standing her ground with an air of confidence she didn't entirely feel. I noticed you've been here a while, she said, her tone calm but firm. And you've been watching me. Care to explain why? He gave her a tight smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Just waiting for my flight, like everyone else, he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. Funny, Ava replied, crossing her arms. Because I don't see you near any boarding gate, and you've been in the same spot since I got here. You're not waiting for a flight. You're waiting for me. The man's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly, a subtle defensive move. Ava's instincts screamed that she was right. Look, he said, keeping his tone even. I don't know what you think is going on here, but you've got the wrong idea. Do I? Ava tilted her head, studying him. Then why don't we go have a chat with airport security? Maybe they can clear things up. His jaw tightened. For a moment, it seemed like he was weighing his options, deciding whether to push back or walk away. Before he could answer, Malik appeared behind Ava, his expression urgent. Ava, he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. We've got a problem. Big one. She turned to face him, but not before catching the flicker of relief in the man's eyes. Malik gestured for her to follow him, and she reluctantly stepped away, making a mental note to keep an eye on the stranger. What is it? She asked as soon as they were out of earshot. Malik glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. The company just sent over the flagged file. It's bad, Ava. Someone's been tampering with your accounts, your flight schedules, passenger lists, even your personal travel details. They've been watching you for weeks, maybe longer. Ava's stomach turned. Watching me? For what? Malik shook his head. We don't know yet. But it gets worse. The flagged file includes a series of messages between someone on your team and an external contact. They're encrypted, but the timestamps line up with key moments. Like the day you finalized the deal with Quantum Logistics and the day you bought the jet. Someone on my team is feeding them information, Ava said, her voice cold. That's what it looks like, Malik admitted. And whoever it is, they've been careful. The messages don't use names, just initials. But there's one detail that stands out. What? Malik hesitated, then showed her his phone. On the screen was a message string, and at the bottom, a chilling phrase. Asterisk, final step in progress. Disrupt her travel. Ensure she's isolated. Ava's breath caught in her throat. They planned this. The jet, the text messages, everything. They wanted me grounded. Exactly, Malik said. And whoever's behind this is playing a long game. They're not just trying to humiliate you. They're trying to dismantle everything you've built. Ava's mind raced. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was even more disturbing than she had imagined. Someone was working from the inside, using her own resources against her. And now they had forced her into a vulnerable position, right where they wanted her. Did you find anything on Lisa Greer? She asked, trying to stay focused. Not much, Malik admitted. She left her last job under suspicious circumstances, like we thought, but there's no direct link to the pilot or the flagged file. It's possible she's just a pawn in all this. Or she's covering her tracks, Ava said. Malik nodded grimly. Either way, she's not here anymore. Security checked the crew areas and she's gone, just like the pilot. Ava clenched her fists. The walls were closing in and the enemy was staying one step ahead. But she wasn't about to let them win. Get me the names of everyone with access to my jet, she said. And track down that man in the suit. I want to know who he is and why he's here. As Malik got to work, Ava's phone buzzed again. She almost didn't want to look, but curiosity went out. The message was short, just like the others. Asterisk, you're running out of time. Her blood ran cold. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching, they were escalating. And now, they were taunting her. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't solve anything. If they wanted her to feel cornered, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Ava looked back toward the man in the suit, but he was gone. She scanned the terminal, her heart pounding, but there was no sign of him. Damn it, she muttered under her breath. Malik returned moments later, shaking his head. No sign of him. Either he slipped out, or he's blending in too well. Ava cursed under her breath. Every lead seemed to vanish just as quickly as it appeared, leaving her with more questions than answers. But she wasn't done yet. If they thought they could beat her, they clearly didn't know who they were dealing with. Call the legal team, she said. Tell them to freeze all outgoing communications from my accounts. No emails, no texts, nothing. And get the IT department to start tracking those encrypted messages. I don't care how long it takes. I want to know who's behind them. Malik nodded. What about the conference? It's still a few hours away. If we don't leave soon, we'll deal with it later, Ava said sharply. Right now, I'm not going anywhere until I figure out who's coming for me. The tension in the terminal was suffocating, but Ava thrived under pressure. This wasn't just about her jet or her business. It was about her legacy, everything she had fought for. And if they thought she would go down without a fight, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. As Ava stood in the terminal, the weight of the situation pressing down on her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something, a piece of the puzzle that was right in front of her. Malik was already on his phone again, coordinating with the legal and IT teams, but Ava's mind was elsewhere. She replayed the events of the day, every interaction, every moment, searching for a clue. And then it hit her. The anonymous text messages, the cryptic email, the vanishing pilot and flight attendant, none of it felt random. Whoever was orchestrating this had a deep understanding of her business, her movements, her vulnerabilities. But there was one thing they couldn't have predicted, her adaptability. Her phone buzzed again, jolting her out of her thoughts. This time, it wasn't a text or an email, it was a call. The number was blocked. Ava hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. Hello? There was a pause, just long enough to make her wonder if it was a mistake. And then a voice, distorted and unrecognizable, came through the line. "You think you're in control," the voice said, cold and mechanical. "But you're not. Walk away now, and maybe you'll salvage what's left." Ava's grip on the phone tightened. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What do you want from me?" The voice chuckled, low and menacing. "This isn't about what I want. It's about what you've taken. Actions have consequences, Ava Sinclair. You should have known that by now." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Ava stared at her phone, her heart pounding. Taken? What had she taken? The cryptic message only deepened the mystery, leaving her with more questions than answers. Malik returned, his face pale. "Ava," he said, his voice low. "You're not going to believe this. The IT team just flagged another breach. Someone accessed the server from an internal IP address, less than an hour ago." Ava's blood ran cold. "Internal? You're saying it came from here?" Malik nodded. "Here, or somewhere nearby. Whoever it is, they're close." The revelation sent a chill down her spine. The enemy wasn't just watching from a distance. They were right under her nose. But who? And why? She scanned the terminal, her eyes darting from one face to another. Everyone looked ordinary, caught up in their own world. But one of them wasn't. One of them was playing a part, blending in while pulling the strings. Her thoughts were interrupted by another buzz on her phone. This time, it was a photo. Her stomach turned as she opened it, a shot of her, Malik, and the man in the suit, all in the terminal just minutes ago. The angle was high, like it had been taken from a security camera or a vantage point above. Underneath the photo was a single line of text. Asterisk. Time's almost up. Ava's hands trembled as she handed the phone to Malik. "They're here," she whispered. "They're watching us right now." Malik's jaw tightened. "We need to get out of here. This is too dangerous." "No," Ava said firmly. "If we leave, they win. They want me scared, off balance. I'm not giving them that satisfaction." Malik looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "Then we need to move carefully. Whoever this is, they planned every step. We can't underestimate them." Ava nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't going to let them win, but she needed a plan. And fast. Just then, a commotion broke out near the security checkpoint. Shouts echoed through the terminal as a group of officers rushed past, their radios crackling with urgent chatter. Ava and Malik exchanged a glance, both of them realizing the same thing. This wasn't a coincidence. "Stay here," Malik said, but Ava was already moving, her instincts kicking in. As they approached the scene, they saw a man being detained by security. His face was partially obscured, but there was something familiar about him. And then it clicked. The man from the photo, the one standing with the pilot near the hangar. Ava's heart raced as she watched the officers cuff him and lead him away. But before they disappeared from view, the man turned his head and locked eyes with her. There was no fear in his gaze, only a smug confidence that sent a chill down her spine. Malik grabbed her arm. "We need to follow them. If he's part of this, we might finally get some answers." Ava nodded, her resolve hardening. Whoever this man was, he wasn't the mastermind. He was just another piece of the puzzle. But he might be the key to uncovering the truth. As they made their way toward the security office, Ava's phone buzzed again. Another text, this one even more chilling than the last. Asterisk. "You're getting closer, but you won't like what you find." Ava's heart pounded as the words sank in. She had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. This was far from over. The stakes were higher than ever, and the game was only just beginning. Ava followed the officers as they escorted the man to a private room in the security office. Malik was right beside her, tension radiating from him as they walked. The man didn't resist, but his air of calmness was unnerving, as though he knew something they didn't. Ava's mind raced with possibilities. Was he the key to unraveling this entire scheme? Or just another pawn in a much larger game? Once inside the security office, Ava demanded to speak with him. The officers hesitated, but her insistence and presence as a high-profile figure left them little choice. With a wary nod, they allowed her a few minutes. Malik stood by the door, watching everything unfold like a hawk. The man sat at the table, his hands cuffed in front of him. Up close, Ava could see the faintest smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth, as if he found the entire situation amusing. She pulled out the photo from her phone and slammed it on the table in front of him. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice sharp and unyielding. The man didn't flinch. You think you're asking the right questions, but you're not, he said, his tone maddeningly calm. Ava leaned in closer, her eyes locked on his. Then why don't you enlighten me? Who's pulling the strings? He tilted his head, as if considering her question. You've built an empire, Ms. Sinclair. But every empire makes enemies. Some hide in the shadows, others stand right beside you. The real question is, do you know who your friends are? His words sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't have time for riddles, but there was something in his tone that felt like more than a warning, it felt like a dare. Before she could press further, one of the security officers stepped in. Ma'am, we've got something you need to see, he said, gesturing for her to follow. Ava glanced at Malik, who gave her a reassuring nod. She turned back to the man, who was now watching her with an unsettling level of confidence. This isn't over, she said firmly before walking out. The officer led her to a monitor displaying live security footage from earlier in the terminal. Ava's breath caught as she saw herself and Malik walking through the terminal, followed closely by someone else. It wasn't the man in custody. It was Lisa Greer. She's still here? Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded. She's been moving through the terminal, staying out of sight. But here's the thing. She's been accessing restricted areas using a stolen ID badge. Ava's mind reeled. Lisa's sudden disappearance from the crew wasn't an accident. She had been working behind the scenes the entire time. Where is she now? Malik asked, his voice laced with urgency. The officer pointed to another monitor, where Lisa was seen entering a maintenance corridor leading toward the private jet hangar. Ava's heart raced as she and Malik moved quickly, following the directions to the corridor. They pushed past a heavy door, entering the dimly lit passage. The sound of their footsteps echoed ominously. They found Lisa near the hangar, crouched over a small device she was attempting to attach to a piece of the jet's equipment. She looked up in shock as Ava and Malik approached, but instead of running, she stood slowly, her expression calm and resigned. So, you found me, Lisa said, her voice steady. Start talking, Ava demanded, her eyes narrowing. What are you doing? And who's behind this? Lisa smiled faintly, a mixture of regret and defiance in her eyes. You don't get it, do you? This was never about you personally. It's about what you represent. Power, wealth, influence. People like you make decisions that change lives, but you don't see the fallout. You think you can control everything, but some of us have been living with the consequences of your choices. Ava's jaw tightened. What choices? What fallout? Lisa's eyes flickered with emotion. My brother worked for Quantum Logistics. When you bought the company, he lost his job. He tried to start over, but the stress, it broke him. He didn't make it, Ava. And you didn't even notice. Ava felt a pang of guilt, but she didn't let it show. So, what? You thought sabotaging my jet would even the score? Lisa shook her head. It was never about the jet. That was just a distraction. The real goal was to expose you. To make the world see that even someone as powerful as you can fall. Before Ava could respond, Malik noticed the device Lisa had been working on. His eyes widened in alarm. Ava, step back. Lisa lunged for the device, but Malik was faster. He pulled Ava out of the way as Lisa grabbed the device and pressed a button. Nothing happened. She stared at it in confusion before letting out a bitter laugh. It was never going to work, she muttered, more to herself than to them. Security officers arrived moments later, taking Lisa into custody. As she was led away, Ava couldn't shake the weight of her words. For all her success, she had been blind to the ripple effects of her decisions. Back in the terminal, Malik handed Ava her phone. The IT team traced the messages, he said. They weren't from Lisa. Someone else was orchestrating this, and Lisa was just a pawn. Ava frowned. Then who? Malik hesitated before showing her the final message they had intercepted. It was sent just minutes ago, from an unknown number. Asterisk, the game isn't over. We'll be watching. Ava stared at the screen, her mind racing. The immediate danger was over, but the real mastermind was still out there, waiting for their next move. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. As she boarded her jet hours later, the weight of the day settled on her shoulders. The stakes had never been higher, but one thing was certain. Whoever was behind this had underestimated her. And she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As the jet's engines roared to life and Ava sank into the plush leather seat, she felt an overwhelming mix of exhaustion and determination. The events of the day played on a loop in her mind, Lisa's betrayal, the mysterious mastermind, and the lingering threat that still hung in the air. She stared out the window as the jet taxied, the city lights twinkling in the distance like a silent reminder of the world waiting beyond this ordeal. Malik sat across from her, his face etched with concern. "You okay?" he asked, breaking the silence. Ava nodded slowly, though she wasn't entirely sure if it was true. "It's just a lot," she admitted. "I thought I had everything under control. But this? This was a wake-up call." Malik leaned forward, his voice steady and reassuring. "We'll figure it out. Whoever's behind this, they made one big mistake. They underestimated you. And now, we know they're out there. That gives us the upper hand." Ava offered a faint smile, appreciating his confidence, even if she didn't fully share it. For years, she had prided herself on being unshakable, on building an empire that couldn't be touched. But today had shown her cracks she didn't know existed, cracks that others had exploited. As the jet climbed into the sky, Ava reached for her phone. There were dozens of messages and missed calls, but one stood out, a voicemail from an unknown number. Her finger hovered over it for a moment before she pressed play. The voice was calm, almost casual. "You're stronger than we thought, Ava. But strength can also be a weakness. Keep looking over your shoulder, you'll never see us coming." The message ended, leaving Ava gripping the phone tightly. She refused to let fear take hold. If they wanted her to be paranoid, to lose focus, she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Malik noticed her expression and raised an eyebrow. "More threats?" "Something like that," Ava replied, slipping the phone into her pocket. "But I'm done playing defense. It's time to go on the offensive." Over the next few weeks, Ava and her team worked tirelessly to uncover the identity of the person, or people, behind the plot. They combed through every piece of data, re-examined every interaction, and left no stone unturned. Lisa, now in custody, had revealed bits and pieces of information during questioning, but she insisted she didn't know the true mastermind. "I was just a pawn," she had said during one interrogation. "They approached me, gave me the tools, the plan. I thought I was taking a stand, but now I see I was just being used." Despite her regret, Ava struggled to forgive her. Lisa's actions had nearly cost lives and had shaken the foundation of everything Ava had built. But in the quiet moments, Ava couldn't ignore the truth in Lisa's words. Her brother's story was one of many, a ripple effect of the high-stakes decisions Ava had made in the name of progress and profit. It was Malik who finally uncovered the lead that cracked the case wide open. Late one evening, as Ava sat reviewing security footage for the 100th time, he burst into her office, laptop in hand. "I found something," he said, his voice tinged with both excitement and urgency. "It's not just one person. It's a network, a group targeting high-profile CEOs. They call themselves, The Balance." Ava frowned. "The Balance? They believe in evening the playing field," Malik explained. "Redistributing power, taking down those they see as untouchable. They've been behind similar incidents with other executives, cyber attacks, smear campaigns, even physical threats." Ava's jaw tightened. "So this wasn't personal?" Malik hesitated. "Not entirely. You were a target because of your visibility, your influence. But there's more. One of the group's members has a direct connection to Quantum Logistics, the company you acquired. They're using your history with the buyout to justify their actions." Ava leaned back in her chair, the weight of the revelation sinking in. She had always known her position came with risks, but this was different. This wasn't just about her, it was about what she represented. "Can we stop them?" she asked, her voice firm. Malik nodded. "We're already working with law enforcement and cybersecurity experts. It'll take time, but we'll dismantle their network piece by piece." In the days that followed, Ava took a step she hadn't considered before. She addressed the situation publicly. In a heartfelt statement, she acknowledged the challenges and criticisms that came with her role. She spoke about the importance of accountability, not just for herself, but for every leader in a position of power. Her honesty resonated with many, sparking conversations about the balance between ambition and responsibility. But it also drew a clear line for her adversaries. She wasn't going to back down. The Balance was eventually exposed, their members identified and arrested. The mastermind, a disgruntled former executive from Quantum Logistics, admitted to orchestrating the plot. But even as the dust settled, Ava knew the experience had changed her. Sitting in her office one evening, she stared out at the city skyline. Malik entered, a cup of tea in hand. You're still thinking about it, aren't you? He asked, placing the cup on her desk. Ava nodded. It's hard not to. This wasn't just about one incident. It's a reminder that every decision I make has consequences, for better or worse. Malik smiled gently. That's what makes you a great leader, Ava. You care. And that's something they'll never be able to take away from you. She returned his smile, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. The storm was over, but the lessons it had taught her would stay. She had faced the unthinkable and come out stronger, not just as a businesswoman, but as a person. As the lights of the city flickered below, Ava made a silent vow. She would continue to build, to strive, to succeed, but she would never lose sight of the people her work impacted. Because in the end, power wasn't about control. It was about responsibility. And she was ready to shoulder it. The jet incident, the threats, the betrayal. They were chapters in a story that had tested her resolve. But they didn't define her. What defined her was the way she rose above it all, stronger and more determined than ever. And as she closed her laptop and prepared to leave for the night, Ava knew one thing for certain. The best chapters of her story were still to come.